Hey, Claiborne, welcome everyone. We are having a chance to talk some football today. And first of all, it's good to see you, sir.
Always
We're
good
in
to
the
see
house
you.
together.
You feel like you've been on the road forever.
Oh my goodness, man. You know what? If they paid me by the mile, I would never have to work again. Trust me. Starting in Seattle, ending up in Milwaukee, back in St. Louis, and a lot of good things going on. But football season is almost about to start. Now, I know you all call it the non-conference games. I call it
The real season.
exhibition is what you all have gone through.
Yes.
But now in the college football scene, we're about to get into the meat of the schedule. But let's talk about last week. Missouri is really rolling right now. They're doing the things that they're supposed to do. They went out and waxed Louisiana, not LSU, but Louisiana. They did it in an impressive manner, and I appreciate the fact that they didn't stumble because, you know, when you have those games on the schedule, you want to make sure that, A, you run your offense, you run your defense, you don't show too much. B, you want to make sure you keep everybody healthy. And C, you can get a look at those younger players that are going to be maybe part of the future or the ones you're going to invite to be part of the portal.
No doubt about it. And the best thing about Missouri is that, you know, the plan is obviously weekly improvement, you know, from the mistakes that you made the prior week. You want to show that you have overcome, you know, all those mental mistakes. And at the beginning of the season, let's face it, you have those. But last week, especially the first 10 minutes of the game, you know, well into the second quarter, Missouri looked invincible. Offense, defense, and special teams just clicking on offense. Ahmad Hardy, the new running back that transferred in from Louisiana Monroe last year, was just spectacular. 250 yards.
But he didn't break the school record or anything.
No, he did not. He left the game early.
That's the only reason
he was probably on his way,
yeah,
no doubt. But early in the season, you want to get him rested. But the offensive line was on a roll. They played extremely well. Very few mistakes. There were a couple of glitches in blocking blitzes, and that's something that Missouri will have to shore up because certainly South Carolina has seen when Missouri tended to go empty backfield, they blitzed the quarterback, and they did not do a good job of picking up those blitzes. But I'm sure those are things will easily be corrected this week, and they'll expect something different from the Gamecocks.
And the other thing is with Missouri, they're not showing the whole package because going into conference play, the competition is going to obviously be better, and you don't want to show everything this early in the season. And I thought, unfortunately, you lose a quarterback, and I know Eli before they played Kansas was like playing the chess match, not showing too much, being basic. But with each game, you have to show a little bit more. But my question to you is offensive line. And, you know, you and I always talk about line play. And that was a concern because you were moving some guys around. You only had, two starters coming back?
Two, right.
And so now give me your impressions of what they're able to do and from a physical standpoint, because still when they play South Carolina, we're going to see something different. So in your opinion, how's that progressing?
I thought they were very physical last week. They played, the synergy was much better. And I think, again, week by week, the more these guys play together, because remember, Connor Tollison is the only person that of the two returning starters, Tollison and Cayden Green, Tollison is the only one who didn't change positions. He's the center. Cayden Green kicked out from left guard to left tackle. So you've got,
and that's a big adjustment.
Huge. He's got the athleticism, of course. Struggled. I won't say he struggled. He had some glitches in the first game, but not to be unexpected. The first time you're out there on that island, you're going to, it looks different during a game than it does in practice. But he seems to have made those adjustments. And the guy he's playing next to, Dominick Giudice, who transferred in from Michigan, who won the national championship, is really the guy that I think has come in from an experience standpoint and, talked about and proved on the practice field what it takes to play like a champion, what it takes to practice like a champion. Yeah. And I thought that was, very, very much needed in this locker room. Not that they were problematic, but when you're trying to get to that level, you have players on this team that don't know what it's like to play for a national championship. This guy can tell you what it took for them, for Michigan, to get there and follow their lead. And I think that follow his lead, and I think they're on their way.
And I think for that position, being an offensive lineman, because when you're a receiver or you're a defensive back or whatever, you kind of on your own island. That's different. But when you're working as a unit, that's a real adjustment. And you did that. You played tackle in college and then moved inside when you got to the league. That cohesiveness is so important in being able to trust each other and knowing where somebody should be. So what's that like right now? Because, we don't talk enough about offensive line play, because if you don't have it, then you don't have the offense.
Yeah.
So for you being in that position, what's that like right now?
So great question. And people ask this question, don't really get a chance to sort of explain it, but it's communication first. Center's making most of the calls when he sees changes on the defense's blitz looks. He's calling him out, in addition to what the quarterback is doing as well. But you have combination blocks, also known as double teams. But typically, whether you're blocking an odd front, you have combos that either deal with center guard or guard tackle, where you're combining to block a defensive end and a linebacker, or a nose guard and a linebacker. So you're blocking the ball snap. You're starting to block as though you're going to double team. And depending on what that linebacker does, that next guy is going to scrape up, move up to the next level and try to cut off that linebacker, depending on the direction of the play, whether it's left side, play side, or back side. But you've got two guys that are responsible for cutting off two other guys. But it depends on what the defense does. That's what predicates how you react as an offensive lineman.
I always thought that the most important guy was the backside blocker, because you get a good linebacker, and I'll use like a guy like Lawrence Taylor. For people who don't know, Lawrence Taylor may be the best defensive player ever to play the game. He may be on the weak side, on the backside, but if you don't cut him off, he might be the guy that will make the tackle for a loss, because you have those kind of guys who are so athletic that they can go right down the line and they can cut you off. So if you don't clip that guy on, and you say, well, he's on the weak side, he's on the other side, we don't have to worry. If you don't get that guy, that's the guy who normally busts up the play before you can even get it going.
Yeah, because of his speed, and he's in that trail position.
Exactly.
And if you leave him unblocked, which is what happens a lot, a guy like Michael Parsons in today's NFL can make the
Good
same
call.
plays that Taylor used to make and wreak havoc. So cutting off the backside for two reasons. A, because he can certainly hurt you even if you're not rolling back. But what happens often, especially in outside zone team running teams, with the defensive flow, they're trying to prevent the runner from getting that edge and getting outside. But what happens if they over pursue, that running back has the option to throttle down, look at the backside, and roll that play back to the backside. So if you're not sealing it off to create an opening, that backside player can make plays often. So you can't allow penetration. You got to really cut off and seal off the backside pursuit.
So here's what I've learned about what we do huddle up. We're going to have like a grease board or a chalkboard so we can.
I was just thinking the same thing. We need to really demonstrate, or Telestrator, if we can get our producer Joe to hook us up there. Oh, well,
we have that.
To look into that.
Okay. Well, next week when we do this, we'll be like John Madden and do it.
And Pat's
power here. I'm just going to be
boom.
Summerall. Yeah. I'm just going to be Summerall. And you know, I'll do the Madden part. Don't worry about the horse being blind. Just load the wagon, which is one of the greatest terms I've ever heard. When he would say that, he would say, and basically he was like, don't worry about all the noise. Just do your job.
Do your job.
That's all you have to do. All right. So Missouri this week has South Carolina. And I know at the beginning of the year, everybody thought South Carolina was going to be everything, or they were going to have an impact. The quarterback is in trouble. They already lost the game. So, but now you're getting the conference play. They all count. What do you think about South Carolina? And there was a time where all the things South Carolina used to think about is how we going to stay close to Clemson. Mm-hmm. Now they become a legitimate player within the SEC. So what are you seeing from them this week?
A Shane Beamer team is always well coached, much like
Yep.
his father, Frank, who coached at Virginia
And especially
Tech.
special teams.
Special teams has always been sort of his forte. And you hear Beamer ball, you think special teams.
Mhm.
But he has recruited a lot of talent on that roster. LaNorris Sellers, Nyck Harbor, the wide receiver, probably two of the best players on the field. Sellers is I'd say probably questionable to probable. He had a concussion on a hit by a Vanderbilt player who was actually called for targeting and ejected. So that Vandy player, because it occurred in the first half of that game, he had to sit out the second half, but he's back this week. Sellers, I heard he practiced on Tuesday. And most teams have a policy that if you don't practice Tuesday or Wednesday, you won't play.
But he's
not
Sellers.
Surprising, but he's Sellers. and yes, this game is very meaningful, of course, to the Gamecocks. Certainly don't want to go down 0-2 in conference play. So he's important, and they want to have him there, and I can understand why. The guy was one of the preseason Heisman favorites. I don't know that he's gotten off to the same start this season, but he's still very dangerous. And, playing a team like Missouri, he had a great game against the Tigers last year in Columbia East. There was one play that he's famously known for when Missouri thought it was Johnny Walker, thought we had him wrapped up and tackled for a sack. He escapes and makes a play downfield. They ultimately come back and win the game because of that play. But that shows you his strength.
I remember like everybody does. I mean, and that's the thing. And you've seen this so many times, just when you think you have a guy. And I go back to the young man who was at LSU, who's now with the Commanders, their quarterback.
Jalen Daniels.
And he was kind of that.
Cayden Daniels.
Yeah. He was kind of a slick guy where when you thought you had him, the next thing you know, he's in the end zone or there's a first down. One of the problems I see in college football, and I see it in the NFL too, they don't tackle like they used to.
No.
And I think it's because in practices, whether it's the summer or during the, there's no contact. There's no, and I'm sure they'll tell you this is how we teach tackling, but the only way you learn how to be better at tackling is actually doing it.
Exactly. And there are a number of drills that are simulated. They have the big tires where guys run through and grab the tires.
No, they just need to bring back the Oklahoma drill. No, just bring back the Oklahoma drill.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
And I guarantee you, if you don't learn how to tackle, the next thing you know, you'll be on coverage teams.
or splinter picking.
Yeah. Having the best sideline seat there is, and you can even keep your helmet on. So anyway,
we're going back to tackling.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing about tackling is that it's a mindset.
Yeah.
It's like covering a kick. You've got to want to do it. And your mindset has to be, if I don't make this tackle, this guy could rip off a long run or possibly score. So if I make the tackle, I don't have to worry about what anyone else does. So if you've got 11 with that mindset, tackling is going to be okay.
But again, it goes back to you have to want to do it.
You got to want to do it.
You want to initiate it instead of being a recipient. As far as you have a decision to make. I'm going to lay him out or I'm going to get steamrolled.
Yes.
And you get the right. You can get steamrolled by an offensive lineman, or if you get one of those backs that turns the corner, he looks at you and says, "Oh yeah, I'm not going out of bounds. I'm just going to put my foot." And I always remember this. And I don't know if you were there when Marcus Dupree was at Oklahoma.
He came slightly after, but I remember it very well.
I never forget Woody Woodenhofer. I think it was a coach, and Terry Matichak was a defensive back, and they asked Woody about what do you think of Marcus Dupree. He said, "Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask Matichak?" Because Marcus Dupree literally put his foot
in his chest.
So
I think Terry still has never lived that down.
Well, you know what? He was one of many who had a problem trying to tackle Marcus Dupree. But anyway, let's get back to South Carolina. What does Missouri have to do? Because this is conference now. This is a team that's in the same league and they recruit the same kind of players. So what does Missouri have to do?
Well, you got to contain the quarterback,
yeah,
for sure. And you mentioned tackling. You get a chance to bring him down. I mean, you've got to tackle, not just tackling, but you're wrapping up and bringing your legs through. It's fundamentals at its best. But you want to try to contain him. They had good practice against the quarterback from Kansas, Jalen Daniels, who was a dynamic runner.
Really
himself.
good player.
Yes, he is. But again, wrapping him up. The outside receiver, Nyck Harbor, who's 6'5", but runs a 4.3 40 and hurt Missouri last year. He's one of those guys that, you got to be really careful. You try to press him and he beats you early, he's gone to make a big play. You don't want to give him too much cushion because he can make plays in front of you. So they've got to be able to find that balance. And the one thing about playing too much zone with a guy like him is that, he'll just eat up the zones and they'll just be able to pick apart your defense.
He'll nickel and dime you all the way down.
So the key, I think, is going to be a limit what they can do on early downs, stopping the run, trying to make them one-dimensional. And hopefully, if Sellers, even though he may play, he still may be somewhat hindered. Try to make him make mistakes in the passing game. But it starts with really, I think, disrupting their outside receivers, tight ends, whatever they're trying to do, because Sellers does get the ball out very quickly, but disrupt the routes, which to me, many teams in college don't do enough of.
Yeah, you know what? I think we don't see enough teams who make the other team uncomfortable, make them stop and start, make them do something they're not used to doing. And that's really more physical in doing that. But if you make a team get out of their comfort zone, then that's how you beat teams now, because physically they can't respond like you would expect them to. So they just throw their hands up. And once you do that, now it's mental, then it becomes physical, and then it becomes defeated. And now I see that a lot more than I used to.
Yeah. And as a defensive player, as a defensive coordinator, that's a great strategy. Whether you utilize blitzes or different formations, things that your opponent hasn't seen, disguising coverages.
Yeah.
And I think Sellers this is be his third year as a redshirt sophomore, but there are still things that he hasn't seen yet. You got to figure out how to scheme against him to force him to be a little bit confused.
Once I get him to call a timeout,
there you go.
Once you get him to call a timeout, that's the mission accomplished. Yep. Because now they have to put that in their memory bank. Hey, I want to remind everybody it's time to talk a little bit about our good friends from DraftKings, their sportsbook. They have an app that you need to download as we speak. And you know what? You can find yourself in a position where you can get $300 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet. And we go live starting in December. December 1st is when the party really starts. And all you have to do is use the code STL Sports, and all of a sudden you're in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? All you have to do is call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-GAMBLER. And you have to be 21 years and older. You physically have to present in Missouri a ID to make sure you're eligible for the process. Also, eligibility restrictions do apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after insurance. Excludes customers who redeem a pre-launch sign-up offer. Also, terms at sportsbooks.com, DraftKings.com/promotions. And I just like to say, what do we say? We wear the crown. The crown is yours. There you go. The crown is yours. How about that? All right. I don't want to be remiss without talking about Illinois. They have Indiana this week. Illinois has gotten off to a good start because Kerry Davis is watching this. We had to give them some love. Kerry, we love you, man. Yeah, I know, because
absolutely
nobody talks about Illinois football other than you, me, and Kerry.
Yeah.
But they're playing well. And you know what? Indiana is one of those programs that they're middling. They're trying to find their footprint in the Big Ten. But this is, I think, a good test for Illinois just to figure out how far they've come. They've been on the road already, and that's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, we know Indiana was a playoff team last year.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly Illinois would love to be able to flex and show that it is the better team here, that it deserves, not just the early respect, but this is a team that they feel they can go the distance and make some noise in the Big Ten. And as of right now, I think they have a pretty good claim in doing so. Just playing well in all areas. And, Indiana is going to be a tough test, but I think the Illini are up to the challenge. I would never count out Brett Bielema. Listen, he's been at a number of stops from Wisconsin to Arkansas and others, but the guy knows how to coach, and he knows how to get a lot out of his players.
I think he's a guy that can take you right there, and then sometimes he may wear out his welcome, but he's developed a pattern of developing programs and upgrading them for somebody else to take over and go from there. I'm looking forward to this matchup. I'm also looking forward to this as we now get into the real college football season where teams are starting to play legitimate teams. I'm almost about to start paying attention to rankings. But the reason why I say almost, how is it that a team like Notre Dame, who hasn't won a game yet, is still ranked?
Remember who the voters are.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's my beef with this whole ranking thing.
Yeah.
And you just touched on the voters, because I've always felt like, how can you rank teams when you haven't seen them yourself? You look at the scores, and although technology is better where you can see games or highlights, but you see highlights, you don't see lowlights. And I just don't know how a person can sit there and actually vote on a team they've never seen and give them that sort of credibility. So it's all about voting for the name instead of the record.
Exactly. And that's what they're doing. They're looking at highlights, probably making a few phone calls. They've got stringers that are out there, but it's almost impossible. How many games can you watch in a week? And you're talking about ranking the top 25 teams.
Exactly.
There's no way, and I know this for a fact, that these writers aren't watching every team out there. So this is why I always say, don't put a lot of stock into the rankings. The eye test is what happens on the field on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And you may go 4 or 5 games and not be ranked or ranked in the low 20s, but what does it matter? I mean, Missouri's what, 23? They still haven't lost yet. I mean, you beat South Carolina. You now got a little bit of an advantage because you're one of the only undefeateds at this point. But you've got momentum because you've got the national eyes. The people that really matter are looking at you.
And you're going to the media schedule too.
Exactly. That's right. So, this is the biggest test from the standpoint of SEC. It's your first SEC opponent, one that, essentially kept you out of the playoffs last year. Missouri lost 3 games last year: South Carolina, Alabama, and Texas A&M. And all good teams last year, especially. Had Missouri beaten South Carolina, much like the argument that the Gamecocks had, feeling as though they should have been in the playoff conversation last year, and maybe they should have, even with 3 losses. But that 3rd loss is what did it for Missouri. Now, I think, looking at how last season went, you lost that early game to A&M. You want to avoid that earlier season loss. But
if you're going to lose momentum early, lose to a good team.
Well, that's true. You've got to lose to a quality team.
Because you lose to who knows State University, then all of a sudden everything is null and void.
So that goes into strength of schedule.
Yes.
Which, looking ahead, I guess in 2026, the SEC is moving from an 8-game conference schedule to a 9-game conference schedule. So we've been talking about this for some time. It does strengthen the overall schedules. And what I think it does is it further will justify having more SEC teams in the college football playoff.
I love it. And I think it eliminates the argument. You go back to last year in Florida State, and there's always a team that doesn't get in, and like, bro, you played, East Toenail Wesleyan in your first game, and you hung 65 points. Who cares? So I think the tougher your schedule gives you more credibility. Now, with that, you run the risk of getting hurt. You run the risk of losing. But I think when you have it on your schedule that you play these teams, the real voters, the people who really put the playoffs together can say, well, they went on the road and they lost somebody, or they went on the road and beat somebody. And again, I've said this countless times. Here's how your non-conference should be. You're going to have 3 games. Regional rival, somebody within, like Missouri played Kansas. Maybe next year they play Iowa, they play Illinois, somebody within the region. Then you have a blood donor, somebody you're going to just beat the living hell out of, and everybody, the alums love the game. And then you have a conference comparable. So if you're third in the SEC, why don't you play third place team in the Big Ten or the ACC? And I know they used to say, well, we make these schedules so far in advance. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. Because when a new coach comes in and he looks at the schedule and he says, well, we can't play USC this year, or we can't play Ohio State. So they take that team, they buy themselves out of it. Mm-hmm. So I think schedules are so fluid now than they've ever been. And so if you play somebody, and I think TV is going to dictate that too. And you think about Texas would have never went to Ohio State first game of the year if there wasn't some money involved. Yeah, and there's some other schools that we've seen in the early portion of the season that are going places to play that they would have never thought about. And I think we're going to see more of that. And I think that helps you down the road. And I don't know how good Texas is going to be. But if it comes down to Texas getting in the tournament compared to some other school with a better record, somebody's going to say, hey, remember, they went to Ohio State early. They lost, but they went there and played them. So I think that's going to have an impact.
And even in that loss, there was a situation where if Texas scores on from the 1 yard line and goes in, it changes the complete complexion of the game.
Yeah.
But then, of course, they didn't score. They're behind, and they forced Arch Manning into some situations that, especially with his first game out, that he wasn't necessarily comfortable being in. So the strategy works. The location works, what you do and who's on your schedule. Also, all those things do come into play. But it will be interesting to see going forward how these schedules, do they remove some of the human element out and do it more by computer? Sort of what like the NFL does. Yeah. There's a mix of both. What's the strategy going forward when you start to put FCS teams that are playing SEC teams? Yeah. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's really fun to watch. As a broadcaster, you just kind of have to get through these games, because you almost know what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah,
because you try to keep it interesting. That's right. So we love getting to this point of the season.
You reduce the blood donors and start playing more competitive teams, and it starts this weekend with Mizzou, and Illinois is the same. All right, let's talk some NFL. They figured it out as far as the schedule is concerned. And what the NFL is doing is saying, we're going to make sure we have the parity. We may not have an undefeated team, and I don't think we will, because the schedule at the beginning, I think, is harder than it is at the end. And case in point, Kansas City's opened up with 2 tough games. Philadelphia has opened up with 2 tough games. And you look at the 2 Super Bowl contenders, and you look at those and you say, one of these teams is not going to go undefeated. And Kansas City is now already 0-2. Mm-hmm. They're trying to find their way. But the NFL knows if we can bait the hook early with good games on the schedule, you're going to follow them for the rest of the year.
Well, that's true. And the reason it's so interesting at the beginning of the season is because everyone starts with the same record. Mm-hmm. They're 0-0. So those games, I won't say that they're more meaningful, but I think they're more attractive early on because no one really knows
who they are.
Yeah,
exactly.
Until you start playing these other teams. And obviously towards the end of the season when, records become more defined and, the team's outcomes or more predictable because we know how many games they've won, how many games they've lost, how many injuries they've had, what players have come in and out of the roster. It's a little more clear, but that's why the beginning of the season is just so interesting in the NFL.
Well, and I'm of the belief, because we talked about this before, how light and loose training camp is, where there's not enough contact. I think what we're going to see is a reduction of exhibition games, and we'll see more controlled scrimmages. I think you get more out of that than playing an exhibition game.
Well, my point is, why even do the exhibition game? It's a ripoff for the fans, in my opinion.
Oh, no, you're right.
You're going to pay a full price ticket
to watch a guy
guys
who's
that you're never going to be on the roster,
working somewhere else.
Yeah,
I mean, and the other thing is, these teams, they already know a 53-man roster. They probably know 45 of the 53 already. So there's like about 5 or 6 spots that are actually open, and everybody else is just out there showing their wares to be on the practice squad or somebody else to pick them up.
That's true. Very true. And because they know that because of the limited number of spots that, they're not going to get the best look here, but they're auditioning to, go through the waiver wire and hopefully someone, and, it's not just the waiver wire. Teams are calling, hey, what about this guy in your practice squad? Can you afford to let him go? We'd love to have him, blah, blah, blah. So everything you do in that league counts, though.
Everybody's watching.
That's so much money involved.
Everybody's watching.
It truly matters.
I agree, and that's one of the things that I think people don't look at. This practice squad. Everybody's looking, and when you're on the practice squad, if I take you off somebody else's practice squad, I have to put you on the roster.
That's right.
You can't be on my practice squad. You have to be on the roster.
Exactly.
And I think that's such a key thing that teams have to be conscious of at this point. All right. So now we're getting into the third week of the season of the NFL. We're starting to see the competition get a little bit more competitive because teams now know who they are, or they think they know who they are. And now they're starting to deal with injury. And that's another issue that's coming into play. What do we do about injuries? Because we have to make sure with a 17-game schedule, how do we navigate that? So what teams have stood out to you in the early portion of the season that you feel like, okay, if they can stay healthy, they might be able to surprise some people or find themselves in postseason?
Well, I think Green Bay is a team that, with the addition of Michael Parsons,
that's Kerry's team.
Yeah, Kerry, we talked about that. Yeah, we did.
And we talked about it, and Kerry was on board with them before they got Michael Parsons.
That's true. Yeah, and I think we talked about that. Who's that one team, and I totally agreed with him. But now, even more so with the presence of Parsons, who has already made a tremendous impact with Green Bay. And, look at Dallas that, of course, they're 1-1, but their defense was not at the level. I mean, they allowed
40.
Russell Wilson.
They gave up 40
plus and 400 plus passing yards to Russell Wilson, who's in his 13th season. Not necessarily a knack against Russell Wilson, but
no, it is because they basically written him off. Everybody likes true. Russ. Now he throws for 400 yards, and all of a sudden Russ is even say, "I'm back." Come on, man.
He's back because of
thanks to Dallas's defense. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know that we'll feel the full impact of that trade until the season is over. Because obviously the player that they got in return, the defensive tackle, I can't even think of his name right now. What will he do? What will he do to impact that defense in a positive way?
So then they go out and sign Clowney. Javadian Clowney from South Carolina, played in the league, very good pass rusher. But I thought the big indicator was this guy was at home doing training camp.
That's right.
Nobody thought he could play or didn't want to pay him. And I thought it showed that the desperation Dallas has already seen that we got to get an edge guy. And, maybe he's a guy that helps the other guys grow. But I think it just says a lot about where Dallas is at, because if you can't get to the quarterback 4 or 5 times a game, you're in trouble.
I think it's a bit of a desperation move.
Yeah.
For the reasons that you mentioned. Like, what does it say to your guys that you have on the roster? We don't think you're.
We don't trust you.
Right.
Yeah.
But who do the Cowboys have to blame? No one but themselves for being in the situation. Either, poor scouting, poor drafting, bad negotiations, emotions. Yeah. These things, they have to be better. They have to be more strategic. And when you've got an owner that insists on, acting as a general manager, without any type of professional history in that role. Yeah, he's been the owner for 30 years, but that's not the same as being out there scouting players, watching film all the time, over and over again. It's not the same. It would be like me trying to go into someone's operating room and do open heart surgery.
So
I can't do it. I can pretend. I can cut the guy open, and I can play around in there.
Surgeries, but you're not going to operate on yourself.
No, well, that's true. That is very true.
So then that's the thing, that just because you see it on TV and you think you know it, until you're in the room and you actually have to do it, and you have to take the emotion out of it. And you can say what you want to say about Jerry Jones. He owns the team and this and that. But at the end of the day, you have to make legitimate football decisions. And I think it comes, are you willing to listen to the people you hire to give you advice?
Well, I think every good manager, supervisor, you hire great people around you.
Exactly.
Because essentially you're relying on their expertise and their opinions to help you make the best decisions. It's like being president of the United States. The success of a president really deals with his cabinet,
his advisors,
and his advisors around him. And if they're making poor decisions, they're only going to make him look very bad.
I think you hit the nail on the head. What else you got? Anything else you want to talk about?
That's really it, man. I think we covered it for this week. Being in the first week of the SEC season, early in the NFL, there's so much that's going to unfold. So I'm just excited about where we are and what we have to look forward to.
I agree with you. I'm excited because now we're getting into the meat of both college and pro football schedule. We kind of seen some teams, and every Monday we're talking about somebody's quarterback, whether they were good or not. And we also look for the highlight of some coach doing his press conference, whether it's Brian Kelly at LSU or Mike McDaniel at Miami. They had some awkward press conferences. And so I'll run this by you before we get out of here. With Brian Kelly, I saw what Brian Kelly was trying to go, because he was tired of hearing about the same thing. And granted, his offense wasn't percolating like everybody thought it was going to be. But I'm surprised that he would have a gotcha moment that early in the season. And I was even more surprised that he apologized to the writer for asking a question that he wasn't comfortable with. I'm a different person on that. And while I understand what Kelly was doing, to go back and say, I'm sorry, man, you asked a question I wasn't comfortable. Man, screw that. He said what he needed to say. He was protecting his team. And I think probably what I would have said was something along the line is, hey, that's still a work in progress. We're trying to figure some things out. I thought we were better in some situations than we were in others. And our mission is to be better next week. We think we know some of the issues that I'm not going to share with you because we play somebody next week. I think we know some of the issues of what's going to make us better. Had he said that, in the story.
Yeah.
But now he wants to admonish someone. And then if you're going to go all the way, man, why are you coming back and apologizing to the guy?
Yeah.
Hey, man, I said what I said. This is our team, and we are who we are.
Well, we all know that, listen, coaches are very emotional, 10 minutes after a game.
Exactly. Yeah. That cooling off period.
I think it's very important. And as a coach, maybe your SID is someone that should sit with you and just kind of talk about what you might expect, right? But as a head coach, you should understand what the temperature of the room is. These are not a bunch of reporters that you haven't seen already. So you can almost anticipate what they're going to say. However, if someone does pose a question to you that either you don't like or it gets under your skin, the best thing to do is pause, think about it. Maybe say nothing. Take the Bill Belichick route. Say nothing. And maybe he asks the question again if you've had a chance to formulate a better response in your mind.
Then you have Mike McDaniel from Miami, who is like all over the place, who I think right now is trying to drink water through a fire hose. I mean, his team offensively isn't as good as it should be, and he was supposedly this offensive guru. You got players that are trying to be on their own and doing things that, it's not what I would consider team oriented. And he's trying to patch this thing up. He don't have enough fingers to put in the dike right now because the thing is about to explode. And now people are talking about, is he going to survive the season? I I think that's a very interesting situation, especially because it's Miami. You and I were talking about this before we went on the air. Miami hasn't done anything since since Shula left, but they keep expecting someone else to do it. And I mentioned Jimmy Johnson, whose last game they hung 60+ points on him. And you think about all the other coaches that have been there since Jimmy Johnson, and the same thing, the result is the same. And I'm seeing Mike McDaniel about to be the next victim.
It's a disaster in Miami. I don't know that they've given the commitments to coaches that they should have. Case in point, Brian Flores, who I thought was going to be a coaching candidate that would enable Miami to start making better steps in the AFC.
Yeah.
A really good defensive coach. You know, you seeing his presence in Minnesota right now. He's getting an opportunity to get the players in there that he wants to do. And I think he was on his way there in Miami. There was some personnel stuff that went on down there, but
he was probably a little too honest with some people.
Yeah, but you have to grow in that role.
Exactly.
You can't just, cut a guy's cojones, because you make missteps. You have to expect those missteps.
Yeah.
But listen, you hired the guy. Commit to him. Make sure that you're making the best hire in the beginning.
That's what interviews are supposed to do.
Right. Yes.
It's for you to be able to see and let him read the room and vice versa. And it's just, but that's the NFL, man, which is, as Jerry Glanville used to say, not for long.
Not for long. But and that's why it's so entertaining.
It is. And I think we look forward to that maybe more than we look forward to the games.
The games itself.
Yeah. I think Monday is almost as important of a day as Sunday.
Yeah.
Because of the discussion that takes place. Throw in the fact that the taboo is how much impact gambling has on the games, and in winning. You can win, but if you don't cover,
it's like you didn't win.
And the best example was Earl Bruce at Ohio State, one of the best winning records in the history of the school. But Earl Bruce didn't cover enough, so they got rid of him.
Sad.
That's how it works. All right, we're done today, folks. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We call this Huddle Up with Howard. I'm Mike Claiborne. We thank you for checking us out. And don't forget, we'll be back next week. And I can guarantee you this, we'll continue to have as much fun today as we did next week. So have a great day. We thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.